Well, next tonight, building a future and mending fences 40 years after the miners' strike. Last night, we heard how so many East Midlands pit villages were torn apart. Tonight, how communities built on coal are adapting to a modern internet economy and the lessons for us all in a world that's being polarised really by angry social media feeds. Our social affairs correspondent Jeremy Ball is in Coalville for us tonight. Good evening to you, Jeremy.
Yeah, hello Anna. If you want to see how Coalville's changing, we'll just have a look at Marlborough Square here. What they're doing is creating a big space for things like events and markets, which they hope will bring visitors into the town. In fact, just around the corner there's a cycle track that used to be the railway to Snibston Colliery. And if you were here around the time of the miners' strike, you will probably remember what they used to call the merry-go-round. Huge long trains like this one that were filled at Bagworth near here before looping round to the Trent Valley power stations. These days though, it's logistics that dominate Coalville's landscape. This is Amazon's largest UK fulfilment centre, 1 million square feet, several hundred jobs which are helping to drive this region's unemployment well below the East Midlands average. More on that in a moment. First of all though, a personal view from Sutton in Ashfield. Mark was a striking miner's son and he's just made a podcast about the strike's lasting impact.
He's out and he's working.
Neighbours against neighbours, friends against friends.
These are miners' wives arguing.
Disagreements turning to fury across a garden fence. Now, this is familiar, isn't it?
And that's there, isn't it? I had the best time of my life growing up in this village, and Sutton Colliery Pithead was 400 yards from my bedroom window, and I saw it every day of my life. Kind of watched you everywhere. I probably saw it more than my mum.
Mark was 10 years old when the strike began here in Stanton Hill.
It was just a massive action. It was the police, pickets, hundreds of them, lots of shouting. Pickets were all along here. I remember my dad was the NUM branch secretary at Silver Hill. They're best friends, Sharon and Jack. Jack worked. My mum's uncle went to work. Christmas was a real struggle. They didn't buy presents for anybody apart from me and my brother.
And this was Mark and his brother at the head of a march for the strikers at his dad's old pit.
This particular shaft here used to raise the coal.
40 years on, this is what's left of Silver Hill Colliery.
It's a memory to what's gone, what fuelled the fires that won 2 world wars. The pit was profitable and they've got 17 years worth of life left in it. If you see what's happening around us economically and socially, it all come about because we were united.
This is where those strikers met. But it isn't just their pub that's gone. Those miners are a distant memory too.
There were 3 pubs in the village with a miners' welfare. With our kid, there were 3 buses an hour from Stanton Hill. Now you can't get 3 buses a day. All of that money's come out of these communities and they've sort of been left to fend for themselves.
Of course, what we're talking about here is communities like this one that were really angry and really divided 40 years ago. And I guess, the last few years, the whole country has become very angry and very divided about everything from the rights and wrongs of Brexit to the rights and wrongs of what's going on in the Middle East. Do you think the country at large can learn any lessons from what happened here 40 years ago?
There's still divisions here now. There's still as many, there's still families that don't talk. The miners' strike's not over. That passion's still there.
I think there's a direct link between 1984-85 than today in the polarisation of people's views. But it all comes down to misinformation. People have got a duty, I think, to find out the real facts about things and find out the real feelings of both sides. And division has not really done anything within these villages any good.
That's George Watson, and you can find Mark's podcast series on BBC Sounds and Radio 4. Just search for Strikeboy. And if you think it looks and sounds a little bit different, it's because right on cue, we've just had a power cut here in Coalville. But what's the future in a town which gets its very name, of course, from the mining industry? Well, let's speak to John Miles from the Coalfields Regeneration Trust. John, Coalville, without the coal, how do you think it's coping?
Well, we would like to think at the Coalfields Regeneration Trust that a really resilient community with the right investment could make it cope very well. We have built some industrial units in other parts of the East Midlands to help create jobs, and I think with the right amount of investment there is a local population who are keen to work.
You can see obvious signs of progress here when there's not a power cut. The council think they're turning a corner, but is it enough, do you think?
I think it's never enough. I think that it is really important that the opportunities are continually given to deprived communities like this on former coalfield sites. And I think with the right partnership and the right community backup, that huge amount can be achieved.
A lot of these jobs are in things like internet shopping, much safer than going down a pit, but are they those good, solid, highly paid careers that people used to have?
Well, I think times are very different, and of course the opportunities need to start with children, with appropriate education, and then with people growing up and adults with good health status, and that gives people the initiative and the opportunity to apply for these sustainable jobs, and I hope that that will make things rosier.
Briefly, what's the future for Coalville, do you think?
I'd like to think with our support it will be rosy.
John Miles, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back in Coalville later this week to hear why one group of miners made headlines here and got the nickname the Dirty 30.